Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we continue our ongoing coverage of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Today, I want to start and have a look at what has or is happening around the small town of Vuhledar. So I'm going to scroll out where you, the viewer, can kind of see the generalized map, and then I'm going to scroll in to that right flank of the Ukrainian forces in the far south that sets on that far southern tip of where we anticipate eventually the Russians will launch a fairly large offensive to try and roll up the right flank of Ukrainian forces. And as we know, the Russians conducted an operation, a reconnaissance in force, near Vuhledar. It appears that elements of the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade, a mechanized unit with a battalion tactical group, possibly of a number of T-72 Bravo 3s, possibly T-80s, a number of other armored vehicles as well, armored infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, total of about 30. And again, that's indicative of a battalion tactical group, were used in an operation near Vuhledar. The reports that are being broadcast by media outlets, pro-Ukrainian supporters, indicate that that battalion was destroyed in zone. It was destroyed just outside of Vuhledar. They provide numerous various video clips and photographs of, I would say, a company-sized element of Russian armored vehicles setting out in a snowy field, clustered together. They appear to have been hit by either artillery or longer-range anti-tank guided weapon systems, and some of those tanks or AFEs appear to be then abandoned. So as I talked before, that the United States, Western allies, have the ability to see the movement of Russian forces. And in all likelihood, that group of that battalion tactical group was identified by either Western intelligence or Ukrainian assets, and then targeted again with either long-range artillery, HIMARS possibly, other weapon systems, and then engaged. And now obviously they're reporting that that battalion was defeated. Was it defeated? Difficult to say. Obviously it stopped forward progress, but again we're only seeing essentially a company-sized element in the field that had been disabled. We don't see a full 31 tanks sitting in there in the open or armored vehicles destroyed. We don't see that. We see what's essentially a company-sized element in the field. Now, more importantly, what was the Russian response? The Ukrainians, the supporters of the Ukrainian military who talk about this operation near Vuhledar as being unsuccessful for the Russian military, they're not going to talk about the Russian response. And what do I mean by the Russian response? Well, the Ukrainians would have had to have launched HIMARS precision-guided rockets from some distance. The Russians would have picked up those rockets on their counter-battery radars. It's possible that the Russians located the units of the Ukrainian military that were using anti-tank guided weapon systems, those anti-tank guided weapon systems teams that were based in Vuhledar, any military unit based in Vuhledar of the Ukrainian military. Then obviously there's going to be a Russian response. The Russians would have gathered some sort of situational awareness about these units that had attacked that reconnaissance battalion. The purpose of that battalion tactical group was not to take control of territory. It was a reconnaissance force. It was designed to draw enemy fire, to identify areas where the Ukrainian military is active and is providing defensive resistance against Russian forces. Yes. Did that battalion set tactical group take damage? Yes. Was it destroyed? We don't know. We know possibly at least a company-sized element of the battalion was disabled. So again, essentially 3 to 4 companies in that battalion set tactical group. So we don't know realistically if the entire battalion tactical group of the 155th Marine Brigade was destroyed. We don't know that. What we also, again, don't know is the Russian response. The Ukrainians are not going to report if Russian attack helicopters or fixed-wing aircraft came in with Elmur missiles, drones, their own ballistic missiles, their own long-range rocket fires. You won't see that. But in all likelihood, the Russians did counterattack with long-range weapon systems against those forces that engaged the 155th reconnaissance element that moved towards Vuhledar. But again, it's the nature of war. The Ukrainian state is not going to then say, yes, we destroyed a company-sized element of this reconnaissance group, and at the same time, the Russians launched attacks on those defensive positions and killed and wounded a number of our soldiers. They're not going to say that, and they haven't said that. But did it happen? Probably. Most likely. Again, the operation that took place near Vuhledar, reconnaissance mission. It was designed to draw enemy fire. If they had the ability to seize control of Vuhledar, if there was limited resistance, then maybe they move in. But again, the purpose of that reconnaissance battalion was to draw enemy fire where Russian assets could then engage those defensive assets. Hope that makes sense. But again, you're not going to hear about that side of it. And that's what I'm trying to explain. In all likelihood, yes, did the Russians take casualties in that reconnaissance operation? Yes. Did it look somewhat unprofessional in terms of the way the at least that one company was clustered together? Yes, it's again difficult to say, but at the same time, then you have to ask the question: is it possible that the Russians moved certain elements into that position on purpose to draw Ukrainian fire, especially HIMARS? The Russians would be willing to dispose of a certain amount of armored vehicles if they could get good bearings, good locations on a HIMARS unit, and thus destroy that HIMARS unit. Destroying a HIMARS unit would be more valuable to the Russians than losing a company-sized element of armored vehicles. Just the way it is. Is that what happened? We don't know. But again, it looks very strange the way those armored vehicles are grouped together. Again, normally they're going to be moving, or they're going to be trying to move very fast. They're going to be in a line or echelon formation. And again, what's weird is they kind of clumped together purposely and then vacated. So again, I have to wonder if possibly that wasn't done on purpose to draw fires from the Ukrainians, where Russian counter-battery radars and drone assets could identify where those Ukrainian assets were, and then engage and destroy those assets. And if it was successful, if the Russians were successful in knocking out indirect fire support from the Ukrainians wouldn't report it. You're not going to hear about it. And in all likelihood, whatever strategy the Russians are using, the Russians aren't going to report why or what they did. You're not going to hear about it. So I'm not saying there's a method to the madness, but again, just be careful about what you're looking at and what you're seeing and what you're hearing, because there may be more to it than what you're seeing on the surface. Hope that makes sense. But again, we're continuing to watch what is happening. The Russians continue to pound away at the Ukrainians with a host of systems, drones, long-range artillery, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and the pressure campaign continues in the east, directed towards Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Bakhmut, Avdiivka. Again, the fighting continues near Bakhmut. Very heavy fighting is taking place. The Russians right now appear to be, again, as I talked about over the past few days, Chasiv Yar, and to the north of Bakhmut as well in this area here seems to be their focus. At the same time, we are starting to hear reports that there's a possibility that the Russians could look to expand and re-invade certain parts of Ukraine. There's been talk about an operation near Sumy and then obviously a operation near Kharkov. Is it possible? Yes. I don't believe, again, we're going to see a wider, large-scale offensive into late summer. I've said that a number of times. And then again, what we're seeing right now is more localized to the eastern Donbass and to that right flank right now in terms of what is happening. So thank you for joining us today. We'll have more very, very soon. And as always, have a good day.